Did you know that machines can learn? In fact, machines learn a lot like you do. If you think about it, you didn't know what a toaster was until your parent showed you an example of a toaster. Machines need to learn from something that's called data. And data is basically just information. Data can be pictures of a dog, they can be sentences, or they can be clips of audio. But basically, in order for a machine to learn from that data or that information, they need a human to label that. And labeling is sort of like putting a name tag on top of a picture. But one thing that makes a difference between you versus a machine is that machines need to learn from a lot of examples. Think of it as a machine needing to see the toaster 400 times before it realizes that a picture of a toaster is a toaster. But you, once you learn it once or two times, you're going to know that it's a toaster immediately. So in a way, it makes you a lot smarter than a machine, even though machines might seem like they're a lot smarter than you.
What comes to your mind when thinking about artificial intelligence? Well, perhaps you're thinking about some amazing robots from the Hollywood movies, or some self-driving cars in the streets, or even the voice assistants in your mobile phone, just like Siri or Alexa. Well, that's what most people see. But before all those could see the light of day, machine learning scientists need to collect the data so that a machine learning model could learn from it. But before the data could be used, it should be labeled. So what is data labeling? Well, it can be as simple as associating the image to its content to tell if the image is about a car or a truck. But in reality, it's much more complex. Because normally the images captured by a camera can contain so many different objects, and we want to let our model know the location information for each of those objects. We do this by using something called bounding boxes. There are also other types of data labeling tasks. In some of the cases, we want to identify all the topics in a document or all the proper nouns in a sentence. Sometimes, the data labeling task can even be subjective, such as content moderation, when people are asked if a specific tweet contains some inappropriate information to themselves. Now, think about every single record should be labeled before they could be used. Isn't that a bit daunting, knowing how much data we're dealing with nowadays?
Have you ever been part of data labeling for a machine learning algorithm? No, you say? Yes, you probably have been. Let me tell you how. Have you ever signed into a website and to check whether you're human or not, they have shown you a grid of images? This is called CAPTCHA, when they ask you to label a few images for a particular object. For example, you may have been asked to label buses in a few images that you were shown. Well, what happened to all of the labeled data that you generated? Oftentimes what happens is that a machine learning algorithm is trained on this data. For instance, a bus detection model would have been trained on all of the buses you selected. Well, sneaky, right? How companies are using your data to generate a profit for their models. Well, think about this one. Facebook recently announced that it has the best facial recognition AI system in the world. Now, where did they get all of that data? If you've ever tagged a friend, family, or coworker on a Facebook image, they've probably used that data to train their models for facial recognition. Now, I don't know your views on this, but I just think this is some relevant information you should be aware about.
It's a hot day today. Luckily, I grabbed myself a bottle of water and some hand sanitizer to use during these uncertain times. Whoa, I just noticed that these aren't labeled. What if I drink off of the wrong bottle? Sounds horrible, right? In machine learning, you have a concept that is very similar called supervised learning. Supervised learning is a process in which humans supervise the learning of machines by accurately labeling the data points that they collected. What if something goes wrong in this labeling process? What if you mislabel something? Something as catastrophic as like an autonomous driving vehicle failing to detect a pedestrian could happen. Sounds horrendous, right? Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of people in academia talking about the criticality of this process to students. People often think that data labeling is easy and often overlook it. But it's definitely not. If I were to give you an example, imagine you're labeling an autonomous driving scene. You'd be faced with scenarios in which there are occluded objects, reflections of objects, or even like a poster that contains objects like a car or a pedestrians. Are we even supposed to label this? Sounds confusing, right? Let's be honest. As machine learning engineers, we don't want to sit all day to label the data points that we collected. That's why we have companies dedicated to label this entire data set efficiently. Cheers.
With the amount of data that we collect every year, it seems that nothing stands in our way to taking machine learning to the next level. That's without taking into consideration the fact that, of course, all of this data needs to be prepared and labeled before it can be used. For many machine learning teams out there, in fact, we're already way past the point where it's even an option to label this data in-house. So this is where the many data labeling companies out there can help us. But even then, we might already be seeing the limits of what can be done with human labeling. Did you know, for instance, that even if every single human on the planet was to stop doing what they're doing right now in order to do nothing else but data labeling, we still wouldn't have enough people to label all of the data. So even if you see an increase in the number of companies relying on crowdsourcing in order to increase the size of their task force, well, that might just turn out not to be enough yet. And still, that's not even the only problem, because with such large volumes of data, all of those companies are also struggling to provide decent SLAs or even guarantee the quality of the labels that they're returning to their customers. The only way out of this predicament, if we're to keep using supervised learning in the future, is to start relying more and more on things such as auto-labeling, the case where you use a machine learning process to generate synthetic labels to be used in your machine learning process. Well, if that sounds like a chicken and egg problem though, maybe that's because it's the case. For me, the only way, or one of the only ways to think about the whole thing the right way is by considering a paradigm based on a human-in-the-loop approach where you'd use a human to try and validate the labels, capture the bad ones coming out of the synthetic labeling process in order to try to make the whole thing better. Unfortunately, there isn't quite enough research in this space yet to take us to the levels where we need to be today. The good news, though, is that I anticipate a lot of very exciting research in this space in the upcoming years.
Hey Arun, you left your bottle in the conference room again.